Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday Bible study. We're just going to give God thanks for today. So, Lord, we come before you and we just thank you for today. Thank you for providing another day for us. Thank you for keeping us, Lord. And the only thing we want to do is exalt you and lift you up, Lord. And we bless your name and we thank you for everything that you have done for us. Thank you for this day. And Father, we pray all of this in the name of Jesus. Thank you. Amen. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the story of Queen Esther. In the Old Testament, in the book of Esther, we see that God was at work in the lives of individuals, the way he is even nowadays, and in the affairs of the whole nation, as a matter of fact. Even when it looks sometimes that the world is in the hands of evil people, like we will see in this story, God is still protecting those who believe and trust in him. So no matter what happens, no matter how hopeless our condition or situation, or how much we would like to give up, and sometimes we do, we need not to despair. Queen Esther lived in the kingdom of Persia after the Babylonian fall, which was in 539 before Christ. And King Xerxes the Great, he was the king of Persia, of course, and he was a very proud king. And actually, he was very impulsive, because we will see how impulsive, like he would make some judgments, and he would come up with the decrees like that. So very proud, very impulsive, and of course he had many palaces, but this particular portion of scriptures where we are going to read, it happened in his palace in Susa or Shushan, and this is where he was holding a banquet. And I was amazed when I was reading that this celebration actually lasted for about like 180 days. That's about 6 months. Wow. And that was some kind of a celebration. And of course, when the kings used to have celebrations like that, it wasn't just for the purpose of celebrating, but it was to plan actually some battle strategies and how to, attack other countries. In this particular portion, it's about Greece and others. So Persia was a world power, and the king, as the center of that power, was actually one of the wealthiest people in the world. So this king, Xerxes, reigned over 127 provinces, stretching, from India all the way to Ethiopia. Xerxes usually made very rushed kind of like decisions. And this particular time, he made also a rush decision when he was half drunk. That was based really on just pure feelings, how he felt. So what was that? Well, he ordered his servants to bring Queen Vashti before the king in order to show her beauty to the people, to the officials, because she was a beautiful woman. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command. And of course, he felt hurt and he was furious. The king then had the wise men, always wise men around him. They were close to him, and especially 7 of them that he was sharing with them everything. So now he's asking, he says, okay, Queen Vashti did not obey my command. What should I do with her? What should I do with her? How? What am I going to do? She's not according to the law, because she didn't obey the king's command. how should she be punished? Well, one of those 7 men said, well, I have an answer for that. So one of them spoke and told the king to write a royal decree that Queen Vashti should come no more before the king, and her royal position to be given to another better than her. Now, and that way, all the wives, when they will hear this royal decree, then they will honor their husbands. Well, like I said, the king was half drunk, so it pleased him what this person said, and he did what he suggested. So, like I said, Queen Vashti refused to parade in front of all this party because she knew that half of them were drunk, and she chose to refuse her half-drunk husband, hoping that he would come to his senses when he sobers up. But once the royal decree was done, the king could not reverse it. Even that was actually the law. So King Xerxes, just like most leaders, had a handful of advisors whom he consulted about everything, every decision that he was making. And actually in the Old Testament, we also have in the book of Daniel, that Daniel was such an advisor under King Darius and King Cyrus. So forced obedience is a poor substitute, really, for love and respect that people should have for each other. So a respect between man and woman comes from mutual appreciation for each other, not from pronouncing a decree and giving orders. But because a Persian king was taught to be a god, that's what they taught. That is why when he issued this law, this command, it stood forever and it could not be reversed, even though in this case it was ill-advised. But if necessary, then a new law or a new decree could be issued to neutralize the effects of the old one. So king sobers up the next day, and he began thinking of Queen Vashti, and he thought to himself, what have I done? She has done so much good for me. But he also remembered that he did banished her when he was angry, when he was drunk. He had banished her from his presence to the advice of his advisors, of his men, and that he did make a decree that he could not reverse or take back now, said. So now he doesn't have a queen. So now he needs a new queen. So Persian kings actually were known to collect like jewelry and things like that, but they also were known for collecting a number of women as concubines. So they gather all these young ladies, young girls, and brought them to the king. And Esther actually was one of those women, one of those young ladies that was brought in the palace. And of course, they went through different like treatments all the time. So each lady, each young woman had that chance to come before the king. So when Esther's turn came, and she was beautiful, so when the king saw her, he crowned her queen in the place of his previous wife, Vashti. So even though Esther became a queen, and queen has more influence than a concubine, but it was giving a little more extra freedom, a little more extra authority than the other, ladies in the harem. But even as a queen, she only had like few rights. Esther was Jewish because her parents were dead and her relative Mordecai looked after her. So Esther really didn't have that much access to the king, so she did not even get a chance or wanted to even reveal her identity to the king. So, but it was actually seen by all that she was a little different because God made the difference in her life. See, God placed Esther on the throne even before the Jewish people were facing the possibility of complete destruction, so that when the trouble came, a person would be already in a position to help. So nobody can mess up God's plan to send the Messiah on earth as a Jewish person. So God could be placing you or me in a position so we can help when a need arises. So in this case, Mordecai, which was Esther's relative, was a very determined person. And of course, that came from his faith in God. Mordecai had a courage to stand alone and doing what is right. Sometimes it doesn't make you popular, but to obey God, actually, it's more important than to obey people. So Mordecai refused to kneel down before Haman, who was the king's man. Actually, he was second in command in the empire. So you could say at the king's right hand. And it's interesting about Haman. Haman's ancestors were enemies of the Jews from a long, long time prior to that, even from the time when the Jewish people came out of Egypt. And you have this as a reference in Deuteronomy 25, verses 17 to 19, and also in Exodus chapter 17 and verse 16. So Haman, the second man of the king, was a descendant of Agag, the king of the Amalekites. So Haman hated the Jews. Haman's hatred was directed not just at Mordecai because he was a Jew, but to all the Jews. You know, hatred is not good. And as second in command in the Persian Empire, of course, Haman loved his power and authority and everybody bowing to him. That made his day. But Mordecai would not kneel before Haman. And because if he knelt before him, he would acknowledge him as a God, a small g. So the Jews looked to God as their final authority, not to any man. And we, as believers, should do the same. So Haman was so self-centered that he wanted to kill all those who disregarded his authority. He was full of pride. He was so consumed by hatred, he could not think of anything else. See, hatred, it's like poison. It poisons people. And his anger was not, like I said, only towards Mordecai, but toward all that Mordecai stood for. And like I said, the Jewish people were so dedicated to God as him being only authority that would be worthy of reverence. So he was prejudiced because of his personal pride. See, he considered, I'm talking about Haman, he considered himself better than all the others. And he had such an arrogant attitude. So he makes a plan. So he went to the king and told him that, King, there are some people in your kingdom that don't keep the laws that you have made. Of course, he lied. Then he asked the king to make a decree that these people, the Jews, should be destroyed, and that Haman will put 10,000 talents of silver in the king's treasury. Now, that's how much he hated him, that he would put all this money in the king's treasury. But you would wonder, where will he get so much money? Well, he must have hoped that to get this money from plundering the homes and the businesses of the Jews, that he would be killed. He would be killing. So King Xerxes took his personal ring, and that personal ring actually was his signature. Whatever decree was made, when they would use that signet ring, it was like the king, personally putting his signature there. So what the king did, he gave Haman his ring, and he told him, okay, you make the decree, here is the ring. The signature and the authority to do what you wish. You can put on the decree, whatever you wish. But see, the king, that's why it's not good to make hesitant decisions. He didn't know that his own ring would actually sign the debt for his queen Esther, because she was a Jew, but he didn't know that yet. So Haman's debt decree was against all Jews in the Persian Empire, and that I'm talking about in all 127 provinces. But this would have included even the land of Israel too. So in this decree, if it was going to be carried out, that means all of God's chosen people could have been killed, and God's plan to send his son to earth as a Jew could have been ruined. But nobody can actually stop God's plans. Nobody can stop. Haman was doomed to fail, as we will see later. So when Mordecai learned of what was happening, that the decree has been written, and then he sends messengers to Esther, and he told her, Esther, don't think that you can escape in the palace any more than all of the rest of the Jews. You're Jewish, you will be killed too. So go to the king. So Esther replies to Mordecai, and she says, okay, I will go to the king, which is against the law because he has not called for me. And if I have to die, I will die. If I perish, I'll perish. So Esther risked her life by coming before the king uninvited. Her brave act gives us an example to follow when we are approaching a difficult or dangerous situations. Like Esther, we can calculate the cost. She knew her life was at stake. Then we can sense her priorities. Just like Esther, she believed that the safety of the Jewish race was more important than her own life. Then she made some preparation. She had the support of the Jewish people, and they prayed and they fasted together. Then she moved ahead boldly, which means she was committed to do what she had to do. Even though she was a queen and she shared some of the king's power, and she still needed God's protection and wisdom, just like we all do. Deliverance, she knew the deliverance and safety come only from God. So after the decree to kill the Jews was given, Mordecai and Esther could have despaired and decided to only save themselves, but they didn't do that. Instead, they saw that God had placed them in their positions for a purpose. No coincidences with God. So they acted on the opportunity that was given to them. And sometimes we wait for God to fix it, but ask God for directions and then act upon whatever instructions He gives you. So God could have placed you where you are now for such a time as this. When we face challenges in life, we need to seek God to know what He wants us to do. And then we go and we do it with confidence that He will do His part. We don't know ahead of time how God will accomplish His will, but we trust God by taking one step at a time. Trust Him and prepare to be surprised by His ways. Sometimes, the way He demonstrates His trustworthiness is amazing. So that's why I'm saying, be surprised. You will be surprised. So by calling the Jews for a fast, Esther was asking them to pray for God's help on her dangerous mission, because this was a dangerous mission. She could have lost her life. She knew that she had to do, and she knew that it could cost her her life. And yet she responded by trusting in God, saying, well, if I have to die, I am ready to die. See, God chooses to work through those willing to act for Him. Esther goes to the king, and she wasn't sure if she will ever come out of the presence of the king alive. But then when the king saw her, and he was actually surprised to see her because he did not call for her, but the action that he did was he extended his scepter, which means, okay, she was welcome in his presence now. And of course, the king asked Esther to come forward and speak what she wants. But instead of giving him her request directly, she invited him to come with Haman to come to a banquet that she will prepare for both of them. And then she asked him to come again, actually, the next day with Haman for another banquet. But in the meantime, God was working behind the scenes. So the king could not sleep that night. Coincidence? I think not. He could not sleep that night, and so he commanded his servants, okay, now go and get all the historical records of the kingdom and read it to me. So that's what happened. They got all these historical records, and the servant read it to him. And then the king discovered that Mordecai had actually once saved his life. Well, he was surprised, and he asked, was Mordecai ever rewarded for that he saved my life? Well, they said, no, he hasn't. So actually what happened was, on the other hand, so this is what's happening with the king. But on the other hand, Haman was so consumed by the hatred for Mordecai that he could actually not even enjoy being invited by the queen to the banquet. Haman had everything. He had wealth, but he craved something that his money could not buy, and that was respect. But see, respect, it's earned. You can't force somebody to respect you. His desire for popularity has become his obsession. So because Mordecai has never been rewarded, now the king started to, plan, how should I reward this good person who actually saved my life? So God was actually saving Mordecai's reward for the right time. So the next morning, when Haman came to the king, he was coming actually to suggest to the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. But before he even had a chance to speak, to say anything, the king asked him, he says, hey, Haman, let me ask you this. What shall be done for the man whom the king delights to honor? Well, Haman thought, well, I'm probably that man that the king is talking about. Who would actually be the king's delight to honor more than me? I must be that man. So of course he answers the king. Well, he says, if how you want to honor that man, well, let me tell you. Let a royal robe that you have worn, king, be given to him. Then let the horse that you have ridden on be brought, so you can put this man on that horse, and then let him parade on horseback throughout the city, and that should be good enough. And then the king said to Haman, okay, so you go, you take the robe, you take the horse, and you go and do this to Mordecai. Well, leave nothing undone of all what you have said. Can you imagine now? Haman had to lead Mordecai on a horse, the man that he hated so much. He had to lead him on the horse through the city and proclaim before him, this shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. And of course, after that, he went home. And it's interesting that, while he's complaining to his wife and whoever else was there, it's interesting what his wife says to him. And this is in verse 13. And she says, you will not prevail against him, against Mordecai, but will surely fall before him. It's almost like she was prophesying before him. And while they were still talking, a servant came and says, okay, Haman, now the king is waiting. Both of you, you're going to Queen Esther's banquet. So the king, again, when they went, asked Esther, what was your request, Esther? And she told them that her and her people were to be killed. And the king didn't even know, like I said, that she was Jewish. And but he just asked, he says, who would dare do such a thing to my queen and to her people? And Esther told the king that it was Haman. Well, of course, Haman was terrified before the queen and the king. So the king commanded for Haman to be hanged on those gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. Well, but not just Haman, but also his 10 sons were hanged too. See, even the sons had to pay for the mistakes of the father. So because of Haman's decree, which was sealed with the king's ring, and it could not be reversed, even by the king, a new decree had to be written, sealed again with the king's personal ring, and then again sent to all the provinces, giving the Jews right to fight back. So when the king took the ring from Haman, he gave it to Mordecai, and Mordecai actually after that served the king and the government for many, many, many years after that. So what lessons can we learn from this story that I just, told? Well, from Mordecai, we can learn that we can trust God's plan. It is the best, even though sometimes we can't see the overall picture. Then the rewards for doing right are sometimes delayed, but they are guaranteed by God himself. And we can also learn that refusing to bow before anyone but God, because God has the final authority. From Haman, we can learn things not to do, and that is that his desire was to control others. We are not to control others. Then Haman, receiving honor was his goal. That shouldn't be our goal. Haman was blinded by arrogance and self-importance. We should not be like that. And actually Haman planned to murder. That's definitely we should not do. We should not do any of these things. Hatred really will be punished, but not by us. And we know that pride and arrogance also. And that thirst for power and control is very, very destructive. So we should be avoiding all of these things that Haman did. What can we learn from Queen Esther? Well, we can learn that serving God sometimes demands that we risk our own security. She risked everything. She risked her life. We can also learn that God has a purpose for the situations in which we find ourselves in. Like I said earlier, there's no coincidences with God. Also, we can learn that courage, while often it's vital, does not replace careful planning. Sometimes we just have to plan some things, and of course, asking God ahead of time, is this plan okay, Lord? So she planned to pray and to fast and get the directions from God. And that's what she did. And that's what we should do. We should just ask for anything that we do. We should ask for God's guidance. Because if we just go our own way, if we go before him, it's not going to be good. We should ask for his guidance because he knows where to lead us. He is the light. And wherever he leads us, we will actually follow him and we'll see where we're going and we're not going to get hurt. Well, hopefully that we learn something from this story, but I find it very, very amazing that from every individual that we talked about, whether it was the king who was making kind of like instant decisions, listening to half-drunk people, or a Mordecai who was very, very strong in faith, and he trusted God, and he knew that God would never let him down, no matter what happens. And then, like I said, from Queen Esther, she put everything online, but you know what? We can never outgive God because he wants the best for our lives. So whatever, if we follow him, it will be the best for our lives. Well, this is it for today, and hopefully you will join me next Tuesday for another lesson. So bye-bye for now, and have a great day, blessed day. Bye-bye.